Temperature screening measures have been rolled out at Singapore's land and sea checkpoints. They join Changi Airport, which has been screening passengers on all flights from China since Wednesday. Gwyneth Cho with more.
Passengers and crew went through temperature screening upon arrival. Singapore's Maritime and Port Authority says besides ferry and cruise terminals, the measures also apply to shipping ports. The screening team includes a nursing staff who identifies any travellers who may need follow-up action.
Good things also because we Singaporeans play safe. It's pretty good. I mean, it's a preventive measure. I guess, it keeps us feeling safe.
They continue their journey after the test, as results may take between 3 and 6 hours, but are advised to minimize contact with others during this time. Those who test positive and are still in Singapore will be contacted and sent to hospital in a dedicated ambulance. All new visitors with recent travel history to Iran, northern Italy and South Korea will not be allowed into Singapore. Singapore citizens and residents returning home from these places will be subject to travel restrictions. The two new measures are to limit the risk that these affected regions may pose to Singapore.
Border controls are still useful at this stage of the epidemic because we can still identify where the sources of risk are, and then we can take appropriate measures to reduce the risk from these infected sources. And by doing so, we flatten the epidemic curve in Singapore, we buy ourselves time, and then we avoid a situation where our hospitals get overwhelmed by a sudden surge of cases. So this is useful, but we have to be prepared that at some stage, the border controls alone will not be sufficient.
Mr. Wong noted that Singapore cannot totally shut itself off from the rest of the world. We must be prepared to deal with this.
We've been used to a certain increase in cases day by day, and I think, every report that comes out, you see a handful, but it may not be always like that. And if there is an incident that sparks a sudden increase, that spike will be an order of magnitude different from what we have been used to. That has been the experience in some of these countries. So we cannot be complacent.
Singapore will redouble its efforts within the country, and the government will keep putting in resources to detect and isolate.
Imagine walking through a crowded airport with a fever when someone pulls you out of the sea of people and asks to take your temperature. Andrew Southern, CEO of Invisible Health Technologies, says with infrared cameras, it won't be long before we're seeing scenes like that play out in a post-COVID world.
I think that it will help people feel confident to come out back into public and go to businesses and go into buildings and get onto airplanes in crowded spaces.
A career technology consultant for large crowds without requiring people to wait in line. Only if someone sets off the machine would they need to be pulled out of the crowd for an individual temperature reading to confirm the findings.
We need to figure out a way to keep everybody safe without slowing them down. And the best of these thermal scanners allow for people to just walk right by.
Which is why Southern says the cameras would be perfect at places like arenas or transportation hubs, where you need to move a lot of people very quickly. And when it comes to privacy concerns, he says they're more important and less invasive than the eyes we already have in the sky.
These are no different than a surveillance camera. They instead of seeing like color, they're seeing temperature. And none of this data is saved. This is all in real time.
The machines are accurate within 0.3 degrees, and Southern says installing them now would help us better prepare for a second wave of COVID-19 or whatever the next pandemic.
To temperature screenings at Changi Airport from Wednesday. Individuals with pneumonia and a travel history to Wuhan will also be isolated in hospital as a further precautionary measure. The ministry says the moves are in anticipation of the increase in travel volume leading up to the Chinese New Year holidays. The health ministry And the National Center for Infectious Diseases has also developed a joint clinical guidance on the new virus. It's been distributed to emergency departments and infectious diseases physicians and public sector hospital labs. And
Okay. Coming in Bangladesh, so all the passengers will be passing through the Samali scanner to the. They will be going to the immigration. If they have the temperature more than 100 degrees Fahrenheit, we will be able to identify him through our monitor. His face will be red in the monitor. So we'll then separate him, and then we'll further question him for any problem he has or not. If any problem, or if we can confirm that he has been infected with the virus, then we are going to shift him to the Kuruman General Hospital for the treatment.
Bringing it here to the US market. But let me show you this system in action. The thermal camera shows people walking by in blue and green colors when they're within our certain limits. But outside of the limits, they're shown in red, and the system will alert. The operator uses a touchscreen to set the alerts, and as people walk by, it's a split screen image. On the left, you can see the thermal image, and on the right, you can see the HD image. This is important because if somebody's alerting, you can then look at the HD image and determine who that is and what they're wearing. It's important when you're trying to pull somebody out of a crowd. But let me show you what I mean in real life. Here's an example from the airport. Bunch of people getting off of an airplane. Everybody's in the clear. You can see that clearly in the video. But look way down the hall. 40 feet down there, there's somebody coming right now with a temperature that's over the limit that we've set. Here he comes. This, unlike everybody else, he's shown in red. And if we pause it here, there's a box around his face in the thermal image. There's also a box around his face in the HD image. We can clearly identify this person and speak directly to him. Let me go back to the product image for a second, because I think this is a great example of the power of this system. In the foreground, there's a gentleman wearing a mask and glasses, but we can still sense his temperature and determine that he's over the limit that we've set. Everybody else in this scene is in the clear. The kid in the background appears to be holding a Coke can, which is cold, and I can see that because it's shown as sort of like a black image. This system is set to only alert on the temperature of people's faces, so it won't go off if you're walking by with a hot coffee cup, for instance. Now, let me talk a minute about privacy. This system can be set to record the images from the cameras as well as a time-stamped log of events or alerts that occur, or it can be set to not record anything and operate completely in real time. And I think that that's important to allay people's fears about privacy.
A cyclical nature for flu or virus pandemic is about 3 to 4 years, and there is a trend that this cycle is becoming shorter. Every pandemic resulted in public panic, fatalities, and a huge impact to local or even global economies. What can we do? Identifying individuals with fever symptoms in public or high-traffic areas is extremely challenging. An effective screening operation should quickly and accurately identify suspected individuals without causing unnecessary obstruction. The operation should be sustainable over long periods of time and in varying environmental conditions. Our solution is the Sentry Mark IV. This is our 4th-generation mass fever screening system with development history dating back to the 2003 SARS pandemic. We have almost 2 decades of experience with such screening operation and have actively participated in the development of screening methodologies. Especially in the past decade, the performance of our Sentry MFSS has been proven, not only in hundreds of active field deployments, but also in independent studies. The Sentry MFSS has achieved results that were previously thought impossible. The Sentry MFSS is accurate, easy to operate, and is flexible enough to be deployed in many places. Sentry MFSS is totally autonomous during operation. No operator input is required and is designed to operate on a 24/7 basis. The integrated tracking feature makes identifying suspected individuals from large moving crowds easy, thus reducing operator workload and preventing mistakes. Our Sentry MFSS is not only found in ports of entry, but can be found in many hospitals, schools, banks, commercial and industrial buildings. They can even be found at zoo entrances, concert halls, and museums. The new Sentry Mark IV is extremely compact, making installation in tight areas possible. In fact, the system can be installed in narrow walkways such as those found on cruise ships. Building upon our decade-long track record, the new Sentry Mark IV is possibly the best and most dependable MFSS available today.